There's a new day dawning, the time is at hand, where the glory of the Lord will be revealed to every man. Open the door, open the door, open the door, and let the King of Glory in. Open the door, open the door, open the door, and let the King of Glory in.
All right, let the King of Glory in. Open up the door. Starts right now. So fling wide, you heavenly gates, and prepare the way of the risen Lord. The Apostle John was on the island of Patmos. He was in prison for the testimony of Jesus Christ, and he heard a sound behind him. He said, "Behold, I looked. There was a door standing open in heaven, and I heard a voice which was like a trumpet speaking with me, saying, 'Come up here, and I will show you the things which must take place.'" That's what we need, my friends. We most definitely need a heavenly perspective of the things that are going on in the world around us. The things that the Word of God foretold us would come to pass, those things which must take place, those things which are taking place even now. That is what this broadcast is all about, discussing the issues of the day and discerning the times in which we live from a biblical perspective and worldview. Good day, everybody. Andy White here. What you are about to hear, as always, is the fusion of heart, mind, and soul. And I want to welcome everybody from all across the fruited plain. And you know what it is, all around the spherical globe. For all my flat earthers out there, yes, it's round and it's spinning around in its orbit around the sun, which I actually will be getting to in a little bit. But thanks for tuning in to this week's edition of Open Up the Doors. I am streaming live on my Open Up the Doors Facebook page at facebook.com/faithfm91.7. If you'd like to join in the conversation over there, let me know where you are watching from. For those of you who are on Facebook, please share this around your streams. I'd appreciate it so much. Invite people over here to Open Up the Doors. If you've never liked the Open Up the Doors page, please like the page. You can also follow me on Truth Social platform. Over there, the audience is growing, the supporters are growing. It's hopping over there at Truth Social, and I'm building up a new listening base over there, which I appreciate so much. You can find me at Truth if you're over there at AJ White. Just look me up there. My handle there is AJ White on Truth Social. You can also follow me also on CloudHub, another social media platform. You can find me at CloudHub at AJ White 777. That's AJ White 777. I'm on others as well, but these are the two I'm mainly pushing right now. If you are outside of the Faith FM broadcast area, download the free Faith FM app. We have the app available for either your Android platform or your Apple platform, of course, whichever your platform is. The app is free. You can listen to great Christian programming here from the east end of Long Island 24/7. Look up Faith FM in Sag Harbor to get the right app. Later on in the second hour of this broadcast, we're on for 2 hours now. Changed it back in April there. I'm on here on the east end of Long Island from 10 to 12 Eastern Standard Time. But in the second hour, we do take in phone calls. We try to take in phone calls anyway. If you'd like to write the phone number down so you can be part of the program later on today, the call-in number is 631-725-2069. That's 631-725-2069 if you would like to be part of the program. And I'd love to have you on. I'd love to have a discussion with you. We want to make this broadcast as interactive as possible. All right, so I'm going to get to it now because, like I say every week, I got a lot to get to. So, how have you been? Have you folks all there, wherever you are? Have you been enjoying the heat? Now, I know for our brothers and sisters down in Australia, it's their winter time right now. They're just completely upside down there in the southern hemisphere. But for those up here in the north, it's been getting pretty hot. It's been getting really hot here on the east end of Long Island. Been working out in the heat, which I don't like at all. I don't like the hot heat and the humidity, but it's really cranking out across the northern hemisphere in the United States as well as Europe and northern Africa. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today because the National Weather Service this past week put out all these, emergency alerts, warnings that there's going to be more than 100 million people across the U.S. this week alone that are under heat alerts with dangerous heat in some locations up to 100 degrees Fahrenheit or higher, which it has been. Yesterday it was 99. It was like 90 degrees real Fahrenheit here, but the heat index here on the east end of Long Island was pushing 100. It's going to be pushing 100 today as well with the heat index. But the National Weather Service has been putting out all these, these warnings and dangerous heat alerts, which are threatening large portions of the south central and northeast U.S., where I am. Record high temperatures, the news has been reporting, have been stifling swaths of North America and Europe, as well as parts of Africa and Asia. Britain this past Tuesday, the UK, had its highest ever recorded temperature of over 40 degrees Celsius. Yeah, they use a different metric over there. I never could figure out the differences between, I know there are differences, but we use Fahrenheit here. That's what I've been grown up with. 40 degrees Celsius. To me, in my mind, that'd be like really cold. But it's not. It was 104 degrees there in the UK. 104 degrees Fahrenheit over there in Britain. Record temperatures. And climate experts, because you got to know this is where it's going, folks. Climate experts have said that the UK wouldn't have temperatures this hot for another 30 years because of global warming. But here we are. They're here now. The climate alarmists have been calling what's going on right now for the last couple of weeks, really. The climate alarmists have been calling it, quote, a global heat wave. Not just local, but global. A global heat wave, which, of course, they're using as proof positive in their minds of catastrophic climate change. And their reasoning, as we have shared many times, and I'll share a little bit more in this program today, but their reasoning is all based on the junk science put out by the UN's IPCC. But I'll get to that in a moment. But you know what? Let me say this, folks. It's summertime. It's what happens in the summertime. We usually do get warm weather. That's what summer's all about. Sometimes we'll even get really hot weather, and sometimes we'll even get heat waves. It happens every so often when you look at the weather history. And sometimes those heat waves are record-breaking. And if there weren't some years that were hotter than other years with record temperatures, then there wouldn't be records to be broken. I know that's circular reasoning. I realize that. But what the rulers of this world system want you to believe is that all of this is all due to man-made. It's a man-made eco-apocalypse that we are experiencing. Anthropogenic global warming, as they like to call it. And we must take control of it. Folks, I'm just going to lay it right out there on the line. Man-made climate change is the biggest mass global fraud of all time. And I'll emphasize man-made climate change. Anthropogenic global warming is a fraud. Is the climate changing? Sure. Climate's changed numerous times through the course of history. But I'll put that off to the side for a moment. But this thing that they're promulgating, this thing that they're hysterical about, is a fraud. It's perpetrated mainly by the IPCC, as I said a moment ago, all based on junk science and falsified data put together by scientists who are funded and paid to give the IPCC the results they want. By the way, if you're not familiar with what the IPCC is, it's the letters for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. That's what IPCC stands for. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is the United Nations body for assessing the science. They're assessing the science related to climate change. But the IPCC is joined at the hip with the UN's Agenda 2030 and the World Economic Forum. And for these Agenda 2030 Great Reset globalists, this present heat wave couldn't have come at a better time. It's summertime. When else would you expect a heat wave? Folks, now let me tell you something. If this was happening in, like, say, December or January, I would really say we have a problem. Now, actually, we do have problems, but I'll get to that in a moment. But the problems we have are not the ones that they're trying to brainwash you into thinking that we have. You see, this present heat wave, as I said a moment ago, couldn't have come at a better time, because it is precisely what they themselves said they would do once they couldn't keep pushing the COVID crisis. What do I mean by that? They blatantly said like a year ago or so that once the COVID crisis was over, they flat out stated and said that they were going to turn their full attention to beating the drums on a climate crisis. The COVID crisis is over, so now we got to have the climate crisis. And lo and behold, what better timing than to have a climate crisis than in the middle of summer when you've got heat waves going on and unusual weather. And I won't deny the fact that we're having unusual weather, but I'm going to get to that in a moment. But right on cue, as I said, they were saying that they were going to buckle down on the climate crisis as soon as COVID was over. And right on cue this past week, it was reported that Joe Biden is preparing to declare a, quote, climate change emergency, which will give him, of course, it will give the federal government, it will give his administration, it will give him, this is important, extra constitutional powers. If Joe Biden declares a climate change emergency, he will seek to override some of our constitutional rights. According to Bloomberg News, quote, White House officials are weighing a separate declaration, and by separate declaration, that means something separate than what he did yesterday. Yesterday, he gave a little bit of a press conference talking about some executive orders he's putting out to address the heat wave and quote-unquote climate change. But White House officials are weighing a separate declaration that climate change is a national emergency, a step that would unlock, as I said a moment ago, broad executive authority to propel clean energy construction. What more windmills? I'm not exactly sure what more clean energy construction actually is, but I digress. This climate change national emergency would restrict oil drilling. Well, he's already done that. And curb, here's a big one, curb the transport of fossil fuels. Let me say that again. A climate change national emergency under Joe Biden would curb the transport of fossil fuels. You think gas and heating oil for your homes coming this winter is expensive already? You think the economy is tanking now? Just wait. If he declares this climate emergency. He's holding it off. The White House said yesterday that he's holding off for now, for the moment, quote, he's holding off for now on an emergency decree that would allow him to marshal sweeping powers against global warming. Sweeping powers against global warming. Sounds like he's Superman. I don't know. The president does not plan to declare a climate emergency this week. I'll emphasize this week. Of course, he may decide to do it next week because, well, I won't go there. The White House said everything is on the table. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said this past Tuesday, it's just not going to be a decision he makes this week on declaring this climate change national emergency. But I'll say it again. If Biden declares a climate change national emergency, folks, watch out. Just watch out. The autocratic tyranny that will come from the federal government will make the COVID pandemic abuses seem mild. So I want to say it again, so no one has any doubt of where I'm coming from, because you probably don't have any doubt where I'm coming from anyway. But let's be clear. Climate change, according to them, their version, their narrative for climate change is nothing but an excuse and an exploitation for full government control and to bring about the UN's and the World Economic Forum's agendas. Folks, it's not about the climate. It's about the control. It's always about the control when these crises develop and when they're exploited. It's about bringing in their globalist, socialist, great reset utopia. They want to be looked upon as being the saviors from the world's eco-apocalyptic demise. We're going to save the world. Now, having said that, laying out the, kind of spreading out the table here a little bit to where I want to go with this, we know, or we should know, as Bible-believing Christians, and I'll emphasize Bible-believing Christians, because they're, according to the stats I've shared the last few weeks, if you've been paying attention, there's less and less, few of those Bible-believing Christians. But I digress. Listen to last week's broadcast. But we should know as Bible-believing Christians that their eco-apocalyptic climate crisis hysteria scenario is simply not the way the world is going to go. But there is a little bit of irony in that, honestly, because in some ways they are partially right. But to whatever degree they're right, it's all for the wrong reasons. You see, folks, the eco-apocalyptic disasters that are coming upon this earth are not due to man-made global warming, nor caused by man, except maybe possibly in the case of a nuclear war. We would certainly change the environment and the atmosphere in a nuclear war. And that may indeed play a part to some of the last day scenarios. But here's the point. The real eco disasters that will come will be from the hand of God during the days of the tribulation. The creation is indeed groaning in the travail of the birth pangs of God's end times judgments. And some of those judgments will indeed come in the form of eco-apocalyptic calamities. We read about that, of course, in the Olivet Discourse of Jesus, which you can read in Matthew 24 and Mark 13 and Luke 21. Not going to go through all that today, but go read those chapters. Many of you are familiar with that. We read about these eco-apocalyptic calamities in the book of Revelation, of course. Yes, folks, a very real global climate crisis is coming. But they got the source all wrong. They got the reasons all wrong. But we read in Luke 21, for instance, what Jesus plainly said in those last days, in those times, there will be great earthquakes in various places, and famines, and pestilences, and there will be fearful sights and great signs from heaven. We're there. We're there. Jesus said there will be signs in the sun in Luke 21:25. There will be signs in the sun. I'm going to get to that in the next block. There will be signs in the sun, in the moon, and in the stars, and on the earth, distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them from fear and the expectation of those things which are coming on the earth. For the powers of the heavens will be shaking. You see, the world is seeing these things. They're just misconstruing and misapplying the source and the reasons. But these things are happening. Jesus said there will be signs in the sun. So I want to reiterate it. And I'm going to get into this in a moment. This current global heat wave, in my humble opinion, is not due to any man-made climate change as they would like to have you believe. But I'll tell you what. What about the sun? Is there anything going on with the sun? What is going on with the sun right now? That should be one of the first questions people should be Googling. I did it the other day. I Googled what's going on with the sun right now. What is solar activity doing right now? Because to whatever degree, pun wasn't really intended, but to whatever degree there is a naturally occurring climate change or unusual weather patterns going on, most of it has to do with the sun. And we will get to that when I come back. I just wanted to set the table right now. But here's a tune by Darrell Evans called Hide Away. Stick around, folks. I will be back. Darrell Evans with a tune called Hide Away. Sweet little tune. Time for me to go and hide away for a little while, to run to the mountain of the Lord. Psalm 91 says, for he who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I'm going to get to some of that near the end of this broadcast. The safe place. The world likes to talk about safe places these days. My safe place, your safe place, ought to be under the shadow of the Almighty. But I'll get to that later. Anyway, I ran across this article this week. I said a moment ago how I was scouting around, looking up some things based on what I already know from Earth Science 101, based on what I've already shared about in the past on this broadcast concerning climate change, man-made climate change, the lack thereof. But I was doing some research because I did want to know what was going on with this current heat wave and some of the pros and cons of what they were saying. Anyway, I ran across this really funny, not funny, it was a good article, but the title was funny. And it arrested me, of course, and I just stumbled upon it. There was this article on a website called sciencealert.com. And it's the subtitle was Something is Up with the Sun. And that, yeah, maybe. Something is up with the sun. And it could mean our models are wrong. Oh, you mean maybe we don't really understand some things? Yeah. But here was the title. This is what really caught my attention. The title of the article on sciencealert.com was The Sun is Being Weird. Yeah. The sun is being weird. It could be because we're looking at it all the wrong way. But this is how the article, let me quote from the first opening paragraph, because this really, for me, summed it up in so many ways. This is a science website. Something weird is going on with the sun. So far, almost every day in 2022, it has erupted in flares and coronal mass ejections, some of which were the most powerful eruptions our star is capable of producing. Now, by itself, an erupting sun is not weird. It erupts regularly as it goes through periods of high and low activity in cycles that last roughly 11 years. I'm going to pause for a moment there on the article and explain some of this. Give you a little bit of a Science 101, Earth Science 101 lesson here. The solar cycles, for those of you who may not be familiar with it, is that there is this thing called the solar cycle. The sun's magnetic field goes through approximately every 11 years. A full cycle is 22 years. Every 11 years, thereabouts. It's not always precisely 11 years. Some years it's shorter. Some years it's a little longer. But generally speaking, every 11 years, the sun's axis is flip. The north becomes the south, and the south becomes the north. And the whole cycle takes 22 years. But yes, the sun goes through these cycles, and one cycle is called a solar maximus. That's when the sun has got the most activity, the most sunspots, the most coronal mass ejection, CMEs, the most solar flares, the most solar prominences. During a solar maximus, there's a whole lot of solar activity. And when there's a solar minimus, there's very little solar activity. And these cycles of solar maximus and solar minimus accounts for the overwhelming differentiation in the Earth's temperatures. Now, let me read the article again. Let me reread what I just read. Something weird is going on with the sun. So far, almost every day in 2022, it has erupted in flares and coronal mass ejections, some of which were the most powerful eruptions our star is capable of. And the current, here's the thing, the current solar activity is significantly higher than the official NASA and NOAA predictions for the current solar cycle. And the solar activity has consistently exceeded predictions as far back as September 2020. One of the reasons that this caught my attention is because I remember doing a broadcast in 2019 that was where we talked about that the cycle of the sun right now, and I'm going to revisit that in a moment, but I remember doing this broadcast, and in 2019, the sun went into what a solar minimus, very little activity. That was just 3 years ago. But it's like all of a sudden, for like the article said, the sun's acting weird. It's doing something strange. Then I saw this other report as I was perusing through this information. In Newsweek, just the other day, this past week, I think it was Sunday, there was an article in Newsweek, enormous structure on surface of sun appears to be coming apart. Now I'm thinking, enormous structure? I didn't know we had any buildings on the sun. What are you talking about? There are structures on the surface of the sun? Well, no, yes, but these structures are called solar prominences. In the Newsweek article says this: a space photographer. I saw the pictures. The pictures are in the Newsweek article. They're incredible pictures. To quote the article, a space photographer has shared an image of a huge prominence on the surface of the sun that appears to be coming apart. That's speculated to be coming apart. It's disintegrating. Now, solar prominences, again, for those who may not know, solar prominences are large, very large, bright loops of plasma, electrically charged hydrogen and helium gas that extend outwards from the surface of the sun for thousands of miles. They basically look like big, huge arches of just red-hot plasma. And both sides of the arch is connected and anchored onto the sun's surface. And these structures are called solar prominences. And they're different. They're different from a solar flare. Solar flares just shoot, straight out into space and are released from the sun. And we get a lot of our aurora borealis and northern lights from these solar flares and also from these corona mass ejections. But a solar prominence is anchored into the sun, and they're huge. They're hundreds of times larger than the Earth. I mean, if one hit the Earth, we would be crispy in nanosecond. But this guy got a picture this past week of the solar prominence that you could see it clearly anchored there's a little bit of a video clip in the Newsweek article, and then all of a sudden you see a part of it just exploding and being released into space. This was last Sunday. Now, what's interesting, and when it's released into space, that solar prominence now becomes what they call a corona mass ejection, and that can do all kinds of things. I can't get into all the weeds of that right now, but the what's the word I want to look for? The nice part about it is what, again, they create these northern lights. And just this past week, Seattle had a beautiful display of all these northern lights. And I saw some of the pictures from that. And when I put two and two together, it dawned on me that this guy who who captured these photographs of this solar prominence breaking apart, being released into space, most likely, and I don't know this for 100%, but most likely that was the cause for all these northern lights that were being seen in Seattle and other places. Let me get back to this Newsweek article just a little bit to give you a little bit more of info on this, because it's pretty interesting. On Sunday, astrophotographer Sebastian Voltmer posted a tweet including a photo of what he called a huge prominence on the surface of the sun. He added, quote, "That's impressive. But what was really spectacular to see was a fast-moving part of it through my small refractor telescope, ejecting and detaching to the side. And like I said a moment ago, when that happens, that creates a CME. Now, CMEs can do different things here to us on Earth depending on how it hits us. Again, we had these beautiful northern lights in Seattle. But sometimes if a CME hits us in a bad way, we can have a huge geomagnetic storm that could wipe out our satellites, could wipe out our power grid. Luckily, that hasn't happened, but that is a very possible thing. But the point in me sharing all of this is simply, folks, we've got this thing in the center of our solar system called the sun. And when you begin to analyze some actual facts and data, you find out, when you compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges, you find out that all those years that the Earth's temperatures were going up, when they were screaming, global warming, man-made global warming, all those years those temperatures were going up, which was mainly in the 70s and 80s, mainly the 80s. They were in direct correlation to increased solar activity coming from that massively dismissed yellow ball of fire in the center of our solar system. So if we had to sum the whole thing up, and I can only be brief here, but if we had to sum up the whole thing in one phrase, it would be this: the biggest factor influencing weather and climate patterns on the Earth is the sun, period. And depending on the Earth's position to the sun at any given time, as we rotate in our elliptical orbit, and as the polar tilt shifts a little bit in the orbit, as we are near or far away from the sun, as well as the sun's own activity, the climate and the weather is going to vary dramatically. It's even going to create drastic abnormalities from time to time, like maybe a global heat wave, that defy everything humans thought they knew about how the Earth worked, not to mention how the sun works. I'm going to say it again. To whatever degree there is a naturally occurring climate change going on, most of it has to do with the sun. But here's the astonishing and unbelievable position of the IPCC and the climate alarmists. They insist, IPCC reports, quote, "We assume that solar activity is insignificant for climate change." You can read article upon article upon article from these climate alarmists who dismiss solar activity. Folks, that's just plain stupidity. Let me use a phrase they like to use. They are science deniers. And the reason they do this is because if they really understood that 99% of the problem, maybe not even 99, maybe 90% of the problem was the sun, it would obliterate their man-made global warming arguments. So they have to deny that the sun has any real effect on weather and climate on the planet Earth. I mean, how do you even get your brain to go there is beyond me. I've had arguments, I've had debates with climate change advocates who will tell me the sun has nothing to do with climate change. They will cite some ridiculous, stupid article where scientists claim that the sun has nothing to do with climate change. I want to tell you something. Climate scientists will claim anything to keep their funding coming in. I'm reminded of what one renowned doctor said when he was being criticized for questioning the official narrative. A famous epidemiologist named Newt Witkowski during the COVID pandemic, when he was going against the official narrative, he had this quote. I just love this quote. It's one of the best quotes of all time. He said, "I don't get paid by the government, so I get to do real science." Now, he was talking about the COVID narrative, but the principle remains. I don't get paid by the government, so I get to do real science. Because these people who are getting paid by the government and by the by the UN, the UN pays them to come up with studies that will support their narrative, and they reject the studies that don't agree with their narrative. Now, I want to get to something with all this, because this is where I'm going with all this. I said a moment ago that 3 years ago I did a broadcast on solar minimum, solar maximum. And we were supposedly going into a solar minimum. And I read an article from 3 years ago, just 3 years ago, that said this, quote, according to experts, the sun has now started a period of low activity, which has been associated with collapsing temperatures. The scientists say that this change could last for over a decade, but that was only 3 years ago. The occurrence of solar minimum is of high importance, as some climate experts believe that solar cycles impose a bigger threat to the Earth as compared to global warming. Those are the ones who are really doing the science. That is caused by destructive human activities. But remember what I read a moment ago, the sun is acting weird. This solar minimum was supposed to last 11 years. Now 3 years into it, we're like having this incredible solar activity. Here's what I really want to get to, folks. The real heat wave is yet to come. And I want to posit to you, just by way of suggestion, could it be that these unusual heat waves and this unusual solar activity, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a precursor to what we are told in Revelation 16 regarding the time of God's wrath, that the sun will be given the power to scorch men as with fire. We read in Revelation 16, 8 and 9 regarding the fourth bowl of God's wrath. Now this event happens really literally just weeks or months before the return of Jesus Christ. This is one of the last things to happen before the second coming. The fourth bowl of God's wrath. And in Revelation 16 it says, then the fourth angel poured out his bowl on the sun, and power was given to him to scorch men with fire. And men were scorched with great heat. And they blasphemed the name of God, who has power over these plagues. And they did not repent or give him glory. The point of all these things, and why I'm trying to tie them together, is that we need to remember that it is God that is using all these things to bring about his eternal purpose. Yeah, the world is missing the point. The world, there are these global heat waves going on. Men are being scorched with great heat. And I'm just kind of appropriating Revelation right now. I realize we're not there yet. But the point is that they're looking to their own solutions, and they're not repenting, and they're not trying to even think that maybe God's trying to tell us something. You see, the real climate change that is occurring or will occur is not man-made at all. It's God-made. It's not anthropogenic. It's theopogenic. It's divinely supernatural. These are just the birth pangs of what is to come. My dear friends, it's not man-made climate change that we need to worry about, and they want to do fear-mongering and inculcate into you. It's the coming wrath of God that we need to be worrying about. And we need to be warning people that perhaps this so-called climate crisis is really simply just a wake-up call to flee from the wrath that is to come.
Jesus is the sweetest name.
But we have a Savior,
I know.
and it's Jesus.
Yes, he is.
Run to him. Run to Jesus, folks. I'll be back. Stick around.
The same as his holy name.
The fusion of our mind and soul. This is Open Up the Doors with Andy White here on Faith FM, WEGB 90.7, 93.3 in FE, WEGQ 91.7 in Quad. Praise God, folks. Praise God. Got a few more minutes in this first hour of the broadcast. Just to give you a little bit of a program note, this first hour, by the way, it re-airs at 3 o'clock today on Thursday. And every Thursday, these first hours re-air. And also at 1 p.m. on Saturday, we re-air the first hour. Not the second hour yet, I don't believe, but the first hour. So if you've missed it, if you had to be drawn away, you can hear it again today. But having said that, we also upload these and archive these broadcasts to my YouTube channel and my Rumble channel. If you've never subscribed to my YouTube channel, please look up Andy White, Open Up the Doors, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Hit the little subscription button as well as the bell next to it. You'll be notified when we upload these broadcasts. You can look me up at Rumble, which is actually the platform I'm preferring people would use, honestly. But if you don't have a Rumble account, please sign up. It's a free account, and you could also get these broadcasts on Rumble at AJ White 777. YouTube has taken some of my videos down in the past. Rumble keeps them up. We like Rumble. Hip hip hooray for Rumble. They're a free speech platform. They don't censor and they don't ban videos like YouTube does. So you could use both platforms, but I do push my Rumble platform more than my YouTube platform. I'm also on another social media platform that's very much similar to Facebook. A lot of people are sick and tired of Facebook. I don't blame you. It's laid out much like Facebook, but again, it's a free speech platform. I am over there. It's called connectzing.com. If you'd like to sign up and get involved over there, it's certainly it's a really good platform. Let me say that. It's certainly not as busy and big as Facebook. But you know, it's working from the ground up, and it's a good little community over there, over at connectzing.com. So I would recommend it. You check it out. All right, I want to get to some closing comments here in the first hour. I will be taking calls, or I'm going to try to take calls in the second hour. If you want to write the phone number down and be the first to call in, by the way, 631-725-2069. That's 631-725-2069. And hey, give me a shout out. Give me a call. You want to pick up this topic on the other side of the top of the hour? That'll be great. Or I'll take any other questions you might have as well. Even if they're off topic. I like to stay on topic, but if you want to go off topic, that's okay as well. But let me get back to the topic because I only got a few minutes left here. We read in the Gospel of Mark chapter 13, which is a parallel account of the Olivet Discourse, famously called. Jesus says this in Mark 13. And it's he said it in Matthew 24 and Luke 21 as well. But the Gospels writers sometimes use different words and different nuances of what transpired, and that's what's important to compare these portions of Scripture. But I like the way it's laid out in Mark. Jesus makes it very, very concise, and it's pertinent to what I'm getting at in this broadcast today. Jesus said, "But in those days," Mark 13, verse 24, "but in those days," what days? The last days. The days before his return. After that tribulation. I don't want to get into a discussion about the 7-year tribulation period, but it is broken into two parts. Very quickly. The first 3.5 years is called the tribulation. The second 3.5 years after the abomination of desolation is set up is called the great tribulation. And Jesus uses both those terms in Matthew 24, and he lines it up that way. It's very clear to see. But Jesus says here in Mark, but in those days after that tribulation, the sun will be darkened. First thing he says. The sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars of heaven will fall, and the powers in the heavens will be shaken. There is the actual, real, eco-apocalyptic crisis that is coming. As I was pondering this verse, I noticed a few things I never really thought about before. One is it's very subtle. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's just me. It never really dawned on me before. Maybe it has to you, but Jesus said the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. You know how scientific that actually is? A lot of people say, oh, the Bible's not science. Bible's not science. It's not a science book. It's not scientific. It doesn't match up with science. That's not true. But here we have, from over 2,000 years ago, the understanding. So it's implied, it's implicit, that if the sun isn't shining, then the moon won't either. Because the moon doesn't have light. The moon only reflects the sun's light. So if the sun will be darkened, then the moon will not give its light. So a little bit of something I found fascinating that I never really thought about before. Jesus was being scientifically correct. But oftentimes we hear in this phrase that the sun will be darkened. Sometimes we hear people say, well, it might be because of a solar eclipse. No. That's too natural. That's too common. That's too predictable. Sometimes you hear that the sun's going to be darkened because of all the debris in the atmosphere from nuclear war and from the destructions that happened during the tribulation. The sun will be darkened and the moon turned to blood because of the refraction and the blockage that happens because of all this dust particles in the atmosphere. I'm not really buying that either, because Jesus didn't say the sun will be obscured. He said the sun will be darkened. When the sun is darkened, it often happens during a solar maximus, when there's a lot of sunspot activity going on. Sunspot activity are what we see as sunspots are really caps, if you will. They're like caps on huge geomagnetic storms on the surface of the sun. Scientists don't know what's happening beneath those black spots. They just know it is a hellish thermal storm. In fact, scientists don't even know what the dynamo is inside the sun that's creating all the energy. They don't have a clue. But to me, when I read this, it hit me in a new way. The sun will be darkened. Could it be that because the angel of God, as we read in Revelation, is going to pour out the bowl of God's judgment on the sun? It's like he's flipping the switch, and the sun's going to be covered with all these dark spots, these sunspots, which create all of this higher energy, which create all this increased heat, which this is where the supernatural meets the natural, if you will. You see, again, I'll say it, the real heat wave is coming when God pours out one of his final bowls of wrath upon the sun, which I read already in the last block in Revelation. But folks, happily, that day, that event is still a ways off, because that event is not going to happen till the second half, near the end of the Great Tribulation. But again, now is the time. Now is the time that we should be pleading with the lost to be saved. Pleading with the lost to flee from the wrath that is to come. And I believe that for God's people, I love this passage in Psalm 121, where it says, the Lord is your keeper. The Hebrew there is protector. The Lord is the shade at your right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord shall preserve you from evil. He shall preserve your soul. There is divine protection in the Lord. And I'm running out of time in this first hour. But I do believe that God, even as God's judgments fall on this earth, his people will find havens of protection, just like in the land of Goshen. Just like when God was pouring out his judgments upon Egypt, his people in the land of Goshen were protected. They were protected from the judgments of God. And I do believe it's going to happen in the last days. Yes, there'll be martyrs. Yes, it's not a blanket statement, but a general promise that God is our protector, that the sun won't strike us by day. Remember, Jesus tells the believers who will be in Jerusalem on that day to flee to the mountains. Flee to the mountains. Run to the and hide. Because we read in Revelation, and I don't have time to get into this now, that when Satan comes against the people of God, the earth helps the woman and opens his mouth. The earth helps the people of God. That it says in Revelation 12, the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness to her place where she is nourished, where she is protected for a time, times, and half a time. That's tribulation language. The people of God are going to be protected. People are always worried about, I shouldn't get into that now. But I'll say it again, what all of these things are telling us is that we need to be prepared and preaching the gospel like never before. Because the time is at hand, and people need to repent and believe the gospel and be saved from this perverse generation. That's it for this first hour. In the meantime, watch, stand firm in the faith, stand fast in the faith, be brave, be strong, and let all that you do be done in love, beloved. I'll be around. Stick around, because I'm coming back. God bless.